Tyler is the communications director for Ted Cruz's campaign, so we asked him back on our show to direct some communications our way about his boss's big victory last night in Iowa. Rick, thanks for coming on.
Glad to be here.
We opened the show by asking the question of where does Ted Cruz's very impressive first-place victory in Iowa leave him with respect to this state, the Granite State? Tell us set some expectations here.
Well, for one, we exceeded the expectation of the polls. The Des Moines Register had him down 5 points. We ended up finished with a 6,000 vote margin, so that was pretty impressive.
Yeah.
So it shows you that with a good game, we can do it again. So we've come here. I don't know. I'm not predicting victory here in New Hampshire, but I think we'll do better than people expect, and in particular because you have 5 candidates you mentioned in the last segment who are going to beat each other up, and Ted Cruz is the only conservative left with a path to victory competing in New Hampshire.
Well, I'm not going to ask you to predict a victory here, but I'm going to ask you what would keep you from winning here? Why was the reason? Is it unreasonable to assume you could win this state?
Well, Donald Trump is at 35%. That's right. Like a 20-point margin. That seems fairly insurmountable, but we're going to give it a try.
Given your resources and the calendar, is it possible that Ted Cruz could wrap the nomination up by March 15th?
I don't want to speculate on it. It's way too early for that.
Is it possible?
It could be possible, but it would depend on a lot of things that I couldn't possibly predict.
Yeah. So do you agree with what we said earlier, which is at this point your candidate is going to be a finalist? He's got the resources and the calendar. Regardless of what happens here in South Carolina, he's a finalist?
Ted Cruz has raised $50 million, and he's raised them from 700,000 different donors, and most of those donors are $100 donors, $50 donors.
So given that, you think he's a finalist, right? He's not going to be knocked out of this race. He's playing in March. You think Donald Trump's playing in March? Or not necessarily?
Given he'll have the resources. I mean, he can write a check.
Right.
I think we'll have the resources because we can go back and ask our donors for checks.
Right.
And we finished cash on hand $19 million. That was more than Governor Christie, Governor Kasich, Marco Rubio combined. So we didn't leave Iowa with no money. We left Iowa with money and an organization, and we have thousands of volunteers already here in New Hampshire. We have a new Camp Cruz that's opened up, that's housing volunteers from out of state, just like we did in Texas, and we'll do that here, and then we'll do that again in South Carolina.
Let me come back to the question I was asking you a second ago about New Hampshire and ask it in a different way.
Sure.
If anybody's going to surmount Donald Trump's lead, who would it be if not you, if not Ted Cruz? Who's more likely to beat Donald Trump here and finish ahead of him than Ted Cruz?
Well, that's a very interesting way of asking it. Right. It probably would be Ted Cruz.
Right. So you think the person who is most likely to finish first in New Hampshire, other than Donald Trump, is your candidate? Is that correct?
It depends. Look, there's a lot of New Hampshire is a very different animal than.
But is there anybody else in the Republican field who's stronger than Ted Cruz?
No.
Setting aside Donald Trump, is there anyone stronger than your boss here?
I think the politics of New Hampshire is a little different. We've been the underdog in this race. No one predicted that we would win Iowa.
How the politics are different, and how does that affect your
because we've focused a lot on the evangelical vote. In fact, one of my favorite headlines came out of New Hampshire. It says Ted Cruz brings religious message to secular New Hampshire, and it's working. He doesn't change his message. He came up here. There's a lot of conservatives who are actually working with pro-life groups, pro-gun groups, pro-growth groups. They formed a 603 alliance. They decided to get behind one candidate because they don't want an establishment candidate, and they got behind Ted Cruz. So he won that by 72%. So if those people can turn out conservatives and the conservatives hang together, I think we'll do very well here.
So coming in here, any change in your strategy, tactics, message, or exactly the same as in Iowa?
It's almost the same because even evangelicals, which we focused on, they do care about the same things. Most people, like, don't burden your kids with debt, protect the country, protect the borders, defeat our enemies, defeat ISIS, grow the economy, create jobs and opportunities. So they all want the same things. There's a lot of commonality that people from New Hampshire, even though they may not be as evangelical as Iowa, and certainly not the SEC primary March 1st states.
One quick question. Sure. Your boss hates getting up early and doing work. What if the Russians attack in the morning? What happens then if he's president? Think about that.
It is true that he does stay up later than most people.
All right. Thank you, Rick.